No one knows how to heal the human body better than the human body. The body is the lens through which the spirit experiences reality. Every single problem of human health can be helped by fasting. You're going to have this change in the lens of reality at the same time as your spirit is going to experience it.
Fasting actually feeds something deeper within us. Dr. Chris Rhodes spent 10 years decoding the 36-hour fast and built the supplement Mimio that delivers those benefits without actually fasting.
My body knows how to live to be 120 years old, but it's just not doing it. Fasting is activating this longevity bio program that we all have inside of us, but just isn't ordinarily turned on. We have plenty of people, especially women, who have found fasting to be really challenging, right? They cannot get past like the 12-hour mark or the 16-hour mark. You can recreate fasting at the molecular level, activate those same beneficial pathways, get those same benefits of fasting, but without actually having to fast. So one of the biggest misconceptions with fasting is that
this conversation about fasting is also scientific and spiritual combined. I think about if we really want to have health span, if we want to live longer and be super healthy, then fasting, some people call it starving. I don't call it that. Fasting is therapeutic. It seems like a paradox that fasting actually feeds something deeper within us. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting concept. You know, when you look at the longevity space, we often run into this problem of if you want to live longer, you often have to kind of live less to a certain degree, right? Mm-hmm. You can't just be out there being hedonistic all the time, just, you know, chasing pleasure and going from experience to experience to experience, because it's ultimately going to wear you out super quickly, right?
Yeah.
So fasting, caloric restriction, you know, having a really healthy, balanced diet and exercise regimen, those are all things that help us live longer. But to a lot of people, at the same time would be like, well, I have to live less because I can't do the things that I want to do. But to a certain degree, those experiences help ground us more in reality, right? Because you have something like fasting where it seems so crazy and foreign to us now in our modern age, right? Of like 3 meals a day plus snacks. We should never be hungry, right? But that used to be how humans lived all the time. You know, food was never a certainty. We always had scarcity. We would always periodically go through periods of fasting where there was just gaps between food. So we think of it now as, you know, living less, but in reality, it's more just like living the way that we were designed to be living. Fasting isn't like something to be afraid of. It's something that our bodies inherently know how to do and we're designed to do.
It's like that phrase we've all heard, there's nothing new under the sun. Like people have been fasting for millennia.
Yeah.
But there's something really special that I found in your research on your site. It's on the screen right now, this incredible supplement that we're talking about today. But the deeper conversation from the supplement is that we're not living in our grandparents' world. We're living in a world where the soil's depleted. We're living in a world where we're accosted with food advertisements, where our decision fatigue is constantly being hooked. So this is a much deeper conversation than simply supplementation. But we supplement because we're in a world where we need scaffolding. If we don't have scaffolding and supplementation in this world, you know, 2026 and beyond, I just don't think that we're going to be as healthy as we possibly could be because we're not living in our ancestors' world.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely true as well, right? Because we are experiencing a lot of new kind of assaults to human health, right? Like microplastics was something that obviously our ancestors didn't have to deal with, right? Kind of like the forever chemicals that we're constantly exposed to. Like every time you touch a receipt, right? You're absorbing some of the ink and it just like never leaves your body. And there can like that can cause hormonal disruptions. So yes, I think every single generation, especially as we increase in technologies and kind of experience these new challenges, let's say, to our health, we're going to have to find new ways to adapt to them. Our health story and our health journey is going to be much different than our ancestors because, you know, definitely there are things that we don't have to deal with that they did, like, you know, Black Plague, right?
Yeah.
that's a good thing. Yeah, mass famine. You know, antibiotics are great. love those. They did great things for human longevity and human health. And so, we make progress in some areas, and then some areas we have to, play catch up because we're kind of creating new problems as we find the solutions to old ones.
Ooh, that's well said. Earlier, I'll circle back to what I was going to say. It's this magic of the 36-hour window. And if you look at the Shaolin monks, this is something that they actually proclaimed was a pillar of their health. It was this 36-hour window. Like there's something, most people think it's like 24 hours. There's something magical about the 36. What is that?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why the 36-hour time point seems to be so magical is because biologically speaking, it takes around 24 hours for your body to actually deplete its glycogen stores, so your stored carbohydrates. And that's really the key mechanism where you switch over from what we would call like postprandial fed metabolism into truly fasting metabolism and ketone metabolism. So once your stored carbohydrates are gone, that's when your body really starts amping up ketone production. That's where a lot of the benefits that we associate with fasting actually begin to happen. Not even that's when they peak, but that's where they actually start. So one of the biggest misconceptions with fasting is that if you're doing like an intermittent fast, like a 16-8 fast, you are getting things like autophagy or, stem cell regeneration or immune resets or even longevity benefits. And that's just not the case because your body hasn't been fasting long enough to actually switch over to this new mode of metabolism. So the 36-hour mark is where we see in a lot of animal models that we get the best lifespan extension. So if you take an animal and you put it on an alternate day fasting regimen, so eating normally one day, then fasting the next, eating normally one day, fasting the next, rinse and repeat for their entire lifespan, you can see anywhere between like a 30 to 80% lifespan increase just by changing when they're eating. And a lot of times this is also independent of caloric intake. So that's where we see the best lifespan extension in the actual animal data. And then going back to the human side of things, that's where we're going to see some of the best mechanisms behind fasting really get to their peak levels. So after that 24-hour mark, and then extending that to the next day.
I love the science you bring. And I always say that like science and spirituality are actually brother and sister. I don't see that they're in silos. I think a lot of what science is now proving, maybe the ancient mystics were already switched onto. Look at all the things that have been coming up around butter and saturated fat and the APOE and you could have a laundry list of things. But I wanted to read a few quotes, and I by no means am saying that you should follow any faith or religion, y'all. You already know that. That's for you to choose. But I want to read these quotes and see what comes up for you. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's said that yoga is not for him who eats too much, nor for him who eats too little. And in the Bible, Matthew 4:4, man shall not live by bread alone. And the last one is, what the eyes are for the outer world, fasts are for the inner. And this is Gandhi in 1925. What arises in you when you hear kind of metaphysical ancient teachings when compared to your academic knowledge?
Yeah, I think that it's speaking to something deeper at a biological level, right? So I'm always going to put things into the context of, yes, what is the science, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's always going to be a tie between what's happening at a biological level and what's happening at a spiritual level, right? Because the body is the kind of like the lens through which the spirit experiences reality, right? When we alter our body chemistry through something like fasting, right, you're going to have this change in the lens of reality at the same time as your spirit is going to experience it. So I think that
so good.
Something that is really happening in or during fasting is that you are kind of reconnecting to your body in a way that it's very easy to get distracted by, especially in modern times.
Yeah. I believe the Greeks, that go back to that phrase, because maybe people are hearing this for the very first time. When you talk about cellular cleanup or the autophagy, it was a Greek term where it came from, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. So autophagy basically means self-eating. And what that gets at is the underlying process of what's happening in your cells during fasting is that they will turn on these cleanup and recycling mechanisms. And it's a form of like energy efficiency and energy recycling. So when you're fasting, your cells immediately get the message that there's not a lot of nutrients around. So what are we going to do? We're going to break down all the things in the cell that are not working for us. So whether that's dysfunctional organelles or dysfunctional proteins, things that are going to kind of like gum up the works. I call it cell junk. And we're going to break down that cell junk into its, constitutive parts, and then use those parts to make new functional proteins and organelles. So we don't have to use net new nutrients. We can just recycle the ones that are old and out of shape and, we don't need anymore, and then turn them into something new. So the autophagy, the self-eating, comes from that, breaking down the old cell junk and turning it into shiny new parts.
It makes so much sense because we have the cells in our brain that clear waste product at night.
Yeah.
And we have the COMT that either is a slow gate or a fast gate. And there's so much science around the way in which the body naturally detoxifies. Do you feel like most people go to fasting because they want to detox, or is it because they want to lose weight? Like, what do you really, or maybe both?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why people fast. And I think that the length of time that people fast usually lets you know which one they're after. So people who are generally more interested in the metabolic health side, the weight loss side, they're probably going to be doing the intermittent fasting, right? Because that's just a natural way to reduce calories, and usually pretty effortlessly, because it's not too big of a lift to say, okay, we're just going to cut out, one meal or delay our eating and put it into a time condensed window where it's just hard to cram in, like 2,000 calories in it's like such a short amount of time. When you get into the deeper stages of fasting, that's usually where people understand the underlying biology of it, understand the science behind it. And that's where you'll see folks who are doing it for like longevity, and they're doing it for other health reasons, like trying to get to the immune cell resets, or maybe they're dealing with chemotherapy or cancer or something like that and want to get into ketone metabolism and, kind of help to protect their cells from what's happening during chemotherapy and the radiation.
It's, to me, fasting is a physiological and also an emotional unlock. Because I used to be 280 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if you've ever struggled with health issues yourself. Have you ever had any large health issues that you've
mainly
surmounted?
Like I had appendicitis when I was 14. That was kind of like my big one that I had to actually have a surgery for. But outside of that, I've been pretty blessed in terms of health outcomes.
Okay, well, knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. Keep fasting.
Yeah, I mean, when I found, it was 2002, 2003 when I entered the health world. And I look back on my intelligence at that time, and there was just so many things that I did not know that I did not know. I was in such a blind spot. And I think in the avenue of fasting, it is really sensationalized on YouTube and in the media. The fasting diet, this diet, that diet. What's so amazing that you have found, there's a shot of Dr. Chris working in the lab right now on the screen. Y'all check this out. This is coming from him in the trenches, which, by the way, his sister's in the studio and she co-founded the business with you.
Yeah, she sure did.
Oh my gosh. So you have a real heart for what you're doing, but you also have the academic knowledge, as y'all can see on the screen. My question for you is this: when it comes to the truth about fasting without fasting, where is Mimio opening up a brand new chapter for people? This never has existed before. This is the first time something like this has ever been able for people to unlock the physiological and the emotional. When did this actually come on scene, and what was the pathway to create this fasting without fasting? Yeah,
absolutely. So this all came from the research that I was doing as part of my PhD in nutritional biochemistry from UC Davis. And basically, when you dive into the research of healthy aging, when you dive into the research on longevity, you always come back to one core thing, is that most things don't help to actually extend lifespan. But something that always does, and is kind of one of the only ways that we know of to reliably do it, is fasting. And not only can it extend lifespan in animal models, but when you dive deeper into the research, it also helps to treat, prevent, or delay most major diseases. So whether that's cardiovascular disease, whether that's autoimmune disease, whether that's cancer, whether that's neurodegenerative diseases, you name it, fasting seems to help with it. And I find that fascinating because it's something that this one thing that helps with everything, but you're not actually adding anything into the body, right? It's not this superfood or this wonder drug that is creating all that benefit. But somehow fasting is activating this, what I like to call longevity bio program that we all have inside of us, but just isn't ordinarily turned on.
Yeah.
And when that clicked for me, I got really mad about it, to be honest.
Why'd you get mad about it?
Oh, because I was like, great. So my body knows how to live to be 120 years old, but it's just not doing it. So that really sparked in me, like, I have to figure out what is happening in the body during these fasts. Why is it so beneficial? And is there a way that we can recreate that so we can just always have our longevity bio program turned on?
Yeah.
And so that's really what led me down the road of Mimio. So what we did was we looked at what happens in the human body during a 36-hour fast. And what we saw was that when you fast for 36 hours, there's this unique set of molecules that are produced by the body that are really only elevated during a fast. And when we screened through those molecules, we were able to find this synergistic combination of 4 of them that when we put them together could recreate a lot of these cellular health and longevity benefits of fasting. So anti-inflammatory effects, antioxidant effects, cardioprotective effects, metabolic health effects. We could even extend lifespan in animal models by 96% just through supplementation. So what Mimio is and what it's doing is it's taking the molecules that your body would naturally produce during a 36-hour fast and then just giving them back to you as a supplement so that you can recreate fasting at the molecular level, activate those same beneficial pathways, get those same benefits of fasting, but without actually having to fast.
Did you have to hook leads up to people and like insert different measurement tools into the body when people, how do you even figure this out?
Yeah, so basically what we did was we just did simple before and after, basically just blood draws of, here's what someone looks like during a baseline overnight fasting state. So like a 12-hour fast, right? And then here's what someone looks like after a 36-hour fast. And when we did that, we did what's called comprehensive metabolomics. So basically looking at all of the small molecule components of the blood. And we identified that there were over 300 significant differences between a baseline state and a 36-hour fasted state. And from there, we kind of screened through those molecules to see which ones actually have bioactivity, which ones are already known to do something in the body. And then we started testing those various combinations to see, okay, if we put them all together, what does it look like? If we put these ones together, does that recreate the benefits? And eventually, that's how we got to our final formulation of those 4 molecules. We found that these were the ones that seemed to activate these complementary pathways, these health and longevity effects that were very similar to what we saw during fasting.
I think this is going to revolutionize the entire health world personally. Like I've been around for over a decade in podcasting. And then before that, 10 years working with clients in gyms. And it just simply didn't exist before. Like it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And you found it.
And this is what we call our biomimetic research approach. And we're really the only ones in the health and wellness space that are taking this approach right now of basically, using these tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that have happened in a human body. And using that basically as a cheat code for scientific discovery. No one knows how to heal the human body better than the human body, right? So we just study how the human body heals itself and just recreate it for you. Yeah. So that's the easiest way that we can do to make not only these great accelerated scientific discoveries, but also discoveries that we know are going to have an immediate context within human health because they're coming directly from human biology.
Oh, this is so good. Okay. So we've obviously, I'm going to link it in the show notes. We did an episode about DNA and methylation. And so I'll link that. That's my question for you right now. It was for people that have slow waste clearing, like a COMT issue. Does this support them even more, or is that not part of the conversation?
So we don't know directly in that scenario what Mimio is going to do. We have seen that the molecules that we're using are definitely around detoxing, right? We have spermidine in there that specifically supports autophagy, which is that cellular cleanup and recycling process. I often like to call it cellular detox. That's basically what it's doing. Then we also have palmitoyl ethanolamide that's in there. That's a like anti-inflammatory endocannabinoid, does a lot of really interesting things in the body, but stimulates through CB1, CB2 receptors, the TRVP receptors. So it's kind of like your body's natural CBD. It's very much like a rest, relax, and recovery molecule. And then there's oleoyl ethanolamide that's in there as well. That's a PPAR alpha activator, which essentially helps to shift cellular metabolism away from carbohydrate metabolism and into fat metabolism. And then it also has appetite suppression effects because it's involved in the gut-brain axis, so kind of like a metabolic supercharger. And then we also have nicotinamide in there, which is a broad spectrum NAD precursor, so really supporting cellular energy. But also NAD plus is basically how your cells sense the energy balance inside of themselves. So if you have very high levels of NAD plus, that's a signal to your cells that there's not a lot of nutrients around. So that actually ends up activating a lot of fasting-like pathways and kind of helps prime the system for the other molecules to work really effectively.
One thing I'm getting a kick out of is how you can go very raw scientific and then speak it for the layman's. I like that because when you're talking about all these, I guess they're Latin named derivatives.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's all Latin.
All the pathways.
Many of us are like, what is Dr. Chris talking about? But I love that because I think I'm going to speak to your heart right now for everybody out there who's tried to do fasting. And this is for me as well. Anxiety and heart palpitations and a lot of stuff come up. I did a 4-day vision quest, Chris, where I didn't eat food for 4 days. And on that fourth night, I mean, I could literally see my sleeping bag just moving. And I was like, I don't know if this is good for me to be in this much stress. Like I understand the spiritual and the bio individuality of like some people can maybe do fasting and it won't bother them. For me, I found that it was just way too much and there's no way I personally, and I wouldn't recommend that anybody does a 4-day fast right out the gate anyways. Talk about how when somebody is experiencing anxiety or heart palpitations during a regular fast, why doing the mimicking is actually a safer path.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of people who just cannot fast, right? It would be unsafe for them to do so if they have a metabolic condition, if they have an immune condition, if they have some kind of hormonal condition that fasting could disrupt even more, or if you get up to more advanced ages, right? Like one of the primary things that we're always concerned about with folks that are over 65 is maintaining muscle mass, avoiding frailty, avoiding bone loss. And those are all things that, intense caloric restriction or fasting can contribute to, especially if you do them regularly over time. So Mimio really helps bridge that gap between people who could really use the benefits of fasting, like the longevity benefits for older folks, but it would be unsafe for them to do so. So that's definitely one element of the product. Then the other element is just for people who want the benefits of fasting, but don't actually want to do the fasting. And then there's a third element too, and this is actually how I use Mimio. It's for the people who are already doing fasting, but want to enhance the benefits of their fast. So Mimio was designed to mimic a 36-hour fast, right? And like we were talking about before, a lot of the benefits that people think that they're getting from these shorter term 16-hour fasts are just not actually there. You're getting some metabolic health benefits, but you're not getting these long-term cellular health benefits. You're not getting the autophagy. You're not getting an NAD boost. You're not getting immune cell regeneration. You're not getting stem cell regeneration. So there's so many facets of fasting that people think they're getting from these shorter fasts that just really don't show up. Mimio can help give you those benefits of a 36-hour fast in a much shorter fasting window. So really accelerate those benefits, give you benefits you wouldn't ordinarily experience, but then also help to make fasting easier because we do have clinically proven ability to help reduce appetite as well. So it just makes the entire journey of fasting more effective and then easier to actually do. So fasting mimetic, fasting enhancing, Mimio really takes care of all of your fasting needs.
Yeah, I wish they probably wouldn't have let me take the Mimio on my vision quest. That would probably have been cheating. But I was literally having kind of a panic attack on day number 4 because I thought, okay, my breath work is not working. I'm drinking water. They allowed us to drink water. But on that 4th day, I'm not even dramatizing. I could see the sleeping bag moving from my heartbeat. And it made me think, how many people could really get so many positive health benefits if they did fasting, but their body just won't allow them. And then I also think about somebody who's probably like hooked on this conversation that's feeling, I really want to fast, but I have to go to work. I'm raising kids. I have all these responsibilities. And just because I'm on a health journey doesn't mean my responsibilities are going to pause. This to me is that scaffolding that I was mentioning to you, where it gives us an advantage. It's kind of like it gives us leverage to deal with the stresses of modernity. How has this conversation played out in some of the people that have been on the Mimio journey? And what do you make of this personally, what I'm presenting?
Yeah, I would definitely say that Mimio has helped a lot of people kind of free themselves from the challenges of their own biology in some way or another, right? We have folks who are taking it during perimenopause who have told us that it's really helped with the symptoms that they're experiencing, just like getting rid of the brain fog or just helping the like hormonal balance be a little bit of a smoother ride, or helping with the metabolic slowdown that can happen during perimenopause or menopause, right? We've had moms and dads write into us saying how it can really help them keep up with their kids, right? And that it can decrease food noise over time. It can help them just feel less aches and pains overall. We've had folks who are like lifelong athletes who are, 65 and older, who are now doing these like big performance feats and using Mimio as a way to help them enhance their exercise performance and recovery and increase their mental clarity and cognition. So there's like so many ways that you can really use this product. And like even to root it back into fasting, we have plenty of people, especially women, who have found fasting to be really challenging, right? They cannot get past like the 12-hour mark or the 16-hour mark. They start taking Mimio, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm just like not thinking about food. Fasting becomes so much easier. Now I can get all the way up to like a full like 1 day fast if I really want to do that. So like it's just been a big unlock for a lot of people to actually be able to harness these, regenerative pathways, these regenerative molecules that otherwise wouldn't be produced in their body without these long-term fasts.
Yeah, I just feel like we deserve this support. That's why I'm so happy that you grind it out in the lab to figure it out, because okay, whether it's our phone or social media or notifications or the food noise you mentioned, I want to go deeper into that later on in the podcast, because this is a really big one, the leptin ghrelin that we've explored before. I want to learn about Mimio's impact on that.
Sure.
But I think about, I guess I could just describe it, Chris, as noise and distortion in general. When we want to accomplish a goal, whether it's health or personal, I find that there's some fairly deleterious forces at times that come in and try to steal our attention. And one of those is the big one. It's the food noise. I mean, we can't go outside without seeing like a Big Mac on a billboard or advertising of any kind. It's like, I don't think that people realize that they're bathing in so much distortion is what I mean. There's so much distraction out there. What do you make of this when it comes to somebody that wants to actually turn down the volume of that food noise? Let's just go into that now, because it's so interesting to me. What actually creates the food noise? What is that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that can create food noise. There can be, hormonal disruptions that are happening. There can be brain chemistry differences between people. There can just be like learned behaviors over time, right? If you had a childhood where you were just kind of like constantly being overfed and there was like no nutritional oversight, right? It can really throw your body chemistry out of whack and your personal habits. And even sometimes the way that we experience love and connection is really tied to food as well, right? We all have, the barbecues that we go to with family and someone's like really trying to push food and you're like, you're too skinny, you need to eat more,
Even that phrase where some families shame their children, hey, clear your plate. Yeah. It's like the child's already full and they're like, clear your plate. It's a learned behavior that I'm hearing from you.
And there's tons of stuff. And then the things that you mentioned too, right? Like food advertising is enormous, right? Like big ag and big food are out here all the time. Yeah. Trying to make you eat as much as possible, right? That's their whole goal. And we also design food now, especially in like large food tech, to be addictive, right? We design products that have these big bursts of flavor that, disappear very quickly, that are designed to kind of create this dopamine feedback loop of I need more and it's gone. So like there's a reason why you can only eat one potato chip, right? So that's really from a societal perspective, from a like a community perspective, from a biological perspective. There's so many reasons why people could be experiencing food noise.
Yeah, the food noise for me, can you break down leptin and ghrelin? So, every question that I'm asking Dr. Chris, it is coming from spiritual and emotional nourishment. But like, it's so cool to get somebody that's gone as deep as you have into science, because when you bring us this scientific evidence, it allows us to rest in the logic of that, such that then we can do the deeper work. I always say that at the physical body, that's why I'm wearing this shirt today, actually, as an homage to your work. The physical is where we start.
Yep.
We cannot have financial, spiritual, emotional, mental nourishment unless the physical body is taken care of first. And I learned this firsthand. So let's go back to the food noise a little bit. Explain the leptin ghrelin mechanism and what's really happening when the donuts are barking in our ear. Like, what is that?
Yeah. So essentially, like, leptin and ghrelin are like some of our major metabolic hormones, right? Leptin goes up as we gain weight or as we eat fat, and typically that's going to be like a halting hormone for folks. Like, so you're going to be producing more leptin as you gain more weight, and that's supposed to kind of put the brakes on food noise. But what ends up happening, and this is very similar to what happens in diabetes, is that we get what's called leptin resistance. So we're producing so much leptin because we have so much fat that our body kind of like goes numb to it a little bit. And it can't signal as effectively as it used to. And when you get caught in that feedback cycle, that is essentially where you get into problems of you just can't feel full, essentially. And you don't have the mechanisms to be able to effectively sense when your body is telling you to stop. Ghrelin, on the other hand, is kind of like the hunger hormone.
Yeah.
And that's the one where, like, when you fast, ghrelin goes up a lot because it's telling you, like, hey, we don't have a lot of nutrients, right? Like, so we're hungry, please go out and find some food. And the balance between those two is one of the, but not the only, mechanism by which our body kind of regulates our hunger responses and how we're responding to food. And like we were talking about with the leptin insensitivity, can really go off the rails pretty quickly, especially if we've had, long-term problems with our eating mechanisms or just like our dietary patterns.
Yeah, I remember many times in my life where I just could not stop eating at night. And I didn't know what it was. And then I started learning more about the leptin and the ghrelin. And the big one was sleep. Oh my gosh. I know you've talked about this ad nauseum, but when you're sleeping well and you're stacking it with something like Mimio, and you're actually eating foods that are metabolically diverse and that are good for your body, in other words, whether you believe in the nutrigenomics equation or not, I think that we all know that like clean whole foods is probably just the best path at this point.
Right. Yeah.
But the sleep piece, have you seen this kind of make up in a way? If somebody's getting poor sleep, they're obviously going to get, the ghrelin's going to increase. But if they took the Mimio, would poor sleep be somehow curtailed by that?
Yeah, definitely. So poor sleep is something that's just going to affect everything across the board, right? It's probably the most underrated aspect of human longevity, because sleep is when we do all of our rest and recovery. And even beyond that, right, the draining of the cerebral spinal fluid is so important because it only happens when you're sleeping. So when we're awake, we have this fluid inside of our skulls called the cerebrospinal fluid that is essentially absorbing all of the waste products that our brain is creating on a day-to-day basis, just as part of its natural biology, right? Like, so free radicals or those dysfunctional proteins that we were talking about before, or just any kind of like cell junk, chemical waste, cell waste, whatever it is. Yep. That's all accumulating in the cerebrospinal fluid. And that only gets drained and only gets replenished and refreshed when we sleep. So when we don't sleep, we get poor sleep. When our sleep is disrupted, that waste removal process really gets affected as well. And that can totally affect our cognitive ability. It can affect our well-being. It can affect our like emotional connectivity. It can affect so many different elements of our biology. And then, not to say nothing of what's happening in the rest of the body as well. But the brain is really the most important component of sleep. And it just kind of radiates out into everything else if you're not getting appropriate sleep.
It's so interesting to me. Water, food, fasting and sleep and movement and breath. those are really the pillars of human function. Like everyone's looking to optimize the human. And we have, like our mutual friend, Dave Asprey, he has that Beyond conference. And I spoke there last year and I walked around the floor and I was just dumbfounded by how many people are selling all this machinery when really those foundational elements that I mentioned to you are circumventing all the thousands of dollars that you might spend on different types of therapies and machines.
Yeah.
Does this irritate you a bit in your field where you see like the pillars being so clear, yet on the other side, you see a lot of marketing noise distracting people from the pillars themselves?
Yeah, that was one of the big things that I kind of came to the realization of when I got my PhD in nutrition. So I was very interested in the nutrition side of things because I was very caught up in that cycle of nutrition and food marketing, right? Where everything's kind of like this big secret, right? And we're trying to unlock these mysterious pathways inside of the body or find exactly the right style of eating or the right nutrients or the right, just the protocols that will actually unlock human health. And they're all being guarded because of these mysterious forces in like the food community or whatever, right? And only this one influencer or this one health guru has all the answers, right? Yeah, and so I was like, all right, something really interesting is happening here. Why is our food system so broken? Why is our knowledge around nutrition so broken? Let me go and figure more of this out. Let me get a whole doctorate that's dedicated to this. And when I got into that program, it's exactly what you said. It is just these very simple principles that we all kind of know, but have just been drowned out by all of this noise that these big food tech, these big, ag tech, these big food industry giants have just been pumping into the conversation because they want you confused. They want you to not know that you can just do these very fundamental principles and have these very good health outcomes. It doesn't have to be as complicated as they think that it is, but they profit because it becomes so complicated that it basically overwhelms us.
This is, again, a cool moment in our conversation that I love because you just brought forth this scientific understanding of clarity. But bear with me for a moment. I just want to share a quick story. And y'all have maybe heard this before. It's the two wolves. Have you heard this parable of the two wolves?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly what you're describing. There's a grandfather and a grandson, and they're out in the field. And the grandfather is describing that one wolf represents hate and shame and jealousy and anger and rage and contempt. And the other wolf is about acceptance and compassion and peace. And the grandson turns to his grandfather and says, well, Granddad, which wolf wins? And the grandfather says, the one you feed. And that makes me feel emotional because I think about how confused I've been in earlier parts of my life and how many people are confused right now. It's not that we're shaming and demonizing big food. Y'all already know. You guys already know the truth. And if you don't, welcome to the truth. It's digesting this parable that I think is so hard for us to digest the parable of the two wolves, that it's actually the one you feed or the one you fast with. Actually, that was a cool little thing. So what comes up for you when I share that parable, especially when you talked about how you yourself got caught in the other wolf?
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's the major thing that we always have to keep on our radar, that we, like the wolf that ended up trapping me and that I ended up feeding for a while, came from my own ignorance around nutrition, right? I was not as well as formed as I should be because our society in general does not put a lot of stock or faith into nutrition science and nutrition research and just understanding kind of like the basic principles of nutrition in the first place. And that leaves a lot of room for the unknown to creep in. That leaves a lot of room for food tech and, big ag and, any marketer to kind of just like slip in there and try and sell you something that isn't based in science. And I got trapped in that cycle because of my desire to learn more about it. But that's kind of the overarching problem, is that when you can't find good sources, when you don't know where your information is actually coming from, it's not going to lead you to the truth that you're actually looking for. And so that's why I decided to get my PhD in nutrition in the first place. Like, I want to know the truth about this like very fundamental aspect of life that we should all have, immediate and like real access to. And the funny thing that I learned when I was in the nutrition department was that so much of it are things that we were kind of taught in kindergarten, right? Like they're very basic principles. And then there are some of them that we have learned just over thousands of years, right? Like fasting.
Yeah.
I think that fasting is like the really fascinating portion of the whole thing, in that we have done it for thousands of years. We have known that it has these healing properties and these restorative properties, but it has kind of been drowned out by society because of the expectation or the societal association that we have with fasting being tied to starvation, and then starvation being tied to poverty, right? So it is almost seen as low class to go through these periods of starvation, right? Where it's like, oh, well, you're doing this because you can't afford food. Like that was classically the reason why people would have to starve or have to fast or anything like that.
Hundreds of years ago, if you were a bit overweight, you were considered to be affluent.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's so wild.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, culturally speaking, fasting kind of like fell out of fashion, or caloric restriction fell out of fashion, because it was not associated with affluence. But when you go and you actually look at all of the science around it, like anytime you look at anything that's really looking at long-term fasting, fasts that are greater than 24 hours, you always and without fail see benefits from it. And it's really crazy to look at it and see, like we were talking about before, it's not just in one instance or another. It is seemingly every single problem of human health can be helped in some way or another by fasting. And that underlying biological mechanism is just kind of, lost to us right now. And that's why I really wanted to do all of this research to kind of rediscover it, figure out what is actually happening, and then be able to apply it in a way that can help people in their daily lives.
Man, it's so interesting in our human journey. Do you find this funny? Like, we go to these massive paradigm swings. When you started, you were upset.
Yep.
Anger is what drove you into a PhD. And then once you get to the PhD, you calm down and you see it from a place of wisdom. And there's a chart here on the wall that I recently put up here, and it's the Hawkins scale. And at the bottom of it, something can be measured per second by a frequency or a hertz. That was Hawkins' work. He did muscle testing. And so if you look at grief or desire or anger vibrates at 175. It's actually 150. But pride, in other words, when you went into your PhD and you let go of the anger, then you actually were more capable of the higher frequency emotions like reason and love and acceptance, and actually practicing the Socratic method. I don't think that anger could be a good substrate for the Socratic method long term. That would not.
No,
that would not work.
Not. Yeah. No, I think that one of the biggest unlocks just to knowledge in general, because this is the whole point of pursuing knowledge, is understanding, right? And understanding can go in multiple different ways, but I think that one of the best is empathy. Right. So when you really approach things from the scientific method, you are not trying to prove anything. I think that would be the pride component to it. Yeah. You are really trying to fundamentally understand the reality of the universe, right? You are just trying to seek truth. That is science at its most basic form, is just seeking truth. And that, in the same way, is about empathy, in understanding somebody else. And when you get to that higher, just like, all I'm here is to try and figure out how reality works and operates, and all I'm trying to do is figure out how you work and operate. All I want is understanding. That is kind of the big unlock, not only for scientific discovery, right, and learning how to build things and make new things, or make Mimio, right? Yeah. But also to learn how we can connect to other people and how we can have more genuine interactions.
If that doesn't hit you in the heart, I don't know what will. I absolutely love this. It's on the screen right now, joshtrent.com/Mimio Health. You can use the code WISDOM to get 20% off. Thank you for that hookup. It's not cheap to create what you create. So I always say, if you, like in vein of Jack LaLanne, I say, if you love something, if you believe in something, you're not actually selling anything. You're just having a conversation about something that really you believe in, that your heart wants to share. What came up for me, I wrote down the phrase you said, truth of the universe. Can you share with people your academic title?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a PhD in nutritional biochemistry, which basically means that I understand or have dedicated my life to understanding how nutrition affects the human body and, metabolism and how that kind of really ends up running the show behind a lot of our body and our biochemistry.
But I love this because, and tell me if I'm correct here, Doctor of Philosophy in Nutritional Biochemistry.
Yeah, correct.
And so when I think about the term philosophy, I might have a definition. You said the truth of the universe. What do you make of what you said about the universe and the truth seeking that became a new fuel substrate for you, in addition to being a doctor of philosophy in nutritional biochemistry? I think there's a unique etymology there stacked against your phrase of truth of the universe.
Yeah. I mean, one of the jokes that I always like to tell about being a doctor of philosophy is that, anytime anyone's on a plane, right, someone's having a heart attack, they're like, is there a doctor on board? I can always just raise my hand and be like, yes, I'm a doctor.
But not that kind.
Yeah, I'm a doctor of nutrition, and I can tell you that he shouldn't have had so much saturated fat 3 years ago, right? Like, that's how I help. I can help in the retrospective, and I can help with the analysis, but, can't be out here saving lives. But that's, one of the reasons why I think that Mimio is so important is because when we talk about like what we can do for ourselves. Why is fasting so impactful? Why can Mimio be so impactful? We're talking about preventative wellness, right? Mm-hmm. Where so much of the decay, the disease, the loss of function that we experience as a result of aging and just going through life are things that can be, avoided and at least delayed, if not totally prevented, through like nutritional interventions and like the whole concept of preventative wellness. We always think about things, and we've kind of been trained to think about things by, like big pharma and like the medical industrial complex, right? Mm-hmm. That things just go wrong in the human body, almost spontaneously, right? And then you have to go to the doctor, and then they patch up the symptoms. Like, we'll get you on this regimen of drugs, we'll get you on this regimen of whatever, so that we can just address those symptoms rather than kind of like treating the underlying cause or preventing them from happening again. Whereas, nutrition allows you to be able to actually, control your life and control your outcomes in a much more predictable way, so that you don't actually get to the point where you have to have like a massive heart attack with a quadruple bypass in order to kind of like get your life back on track.
So from a philosophical lens, how might you describe what food really is?
I would, from a philosophical lens, what I always find really fascinating about food is that it's the classic saying, you are what you eat, right?
Yeah.
But that is just incredibly true. Like, the molecules that we take into our body literally become us. They get incorporated into our cells and they become a part of our body. So whatever you're putting into your body from a nutritional perspective is ultimately going to become your cells. It's going to become your brain. It's going to become your heart. It's going to become your liver. It's going to become your intestines. It's going to become your skin, right? It is all there. So it is of prime importance to make sure that the things that you are putting into your body, which are eventually going to become your body, are like high quality and in the proper balance to be able to achieve human health.
There's a lot of purists out there. I'm sure that you've maybe had this feedback or blowback. I don't know. But especially in the alternative circles where people say, if you take peptides, if you take TRT, if you take anything that doesn't specifically come from nature where you can pick it off a tree, it's a very purist way of thinking. They might say, well, Dr. Chris, the whole thing of the fast is that you are friends with your discomfort. Does Mimio in any way respond to that, where it's like still sacred to do a fast? It's still a journey. You're just not dealing with so much of the negative ramifications. Has this conversation come up where people say, well, you're stealing the sacredness of the fast?
I think that's maybe come up one or two times. And I like my response to that is usually that I'm not trying to steal anything from anybody. I'm trying to give benefits to people who might not be able to experience it anyway. And also, Mimio does not prevent you from fasting, right? It makes a great, like we were talking about before, fasting enhancer. So it can not only give you better biological benefits from the fasting that you are doing, but by helping to make it easier, it can help you actually do longer term fasts, right? So it can actually be a tool to help you get to the point where you can experience, greater fasts that will get you in greater touch with your body or spirituality, if that is really what you're going for, right? So, nothing about this product prevents any kind of spirituality from happening. It's really just, almost a tool to help you get even further into it.
Yeah, because then I love that you said that. I'm not trying to steal anything from anyone. Gosh, the way that our ancestors lived was inherently challenging. I know we talked about this in the beginning of the pod. They dealt with certain things that we don't have to deal with, but yet from the PFAS and the plastics, I remember Brian Johnson was saying like he had so much plastic in his body that it wasn't until he did this massive sauna protocol that relieved him of the plastics. And I believe there's only one. Have you heard of this? There's only one regimented test that can actually prove your level of microplastics in the body. Have you come across this?
Yeah, we end up having a lot of, just like very specific tests in science because like we were talking about before, microplastics are something that is a very new challenge that we're experiencing as a species, which will be just, wasn't there in antiquity, right?
Yeah.
So we are still having a lot of emerging technologies that are going to come out about microplastics. We're going to have a lot of emerging research that's going to come out about microplastics, and we're really going to get to see over time what the impacts of them are. And so it's kind of the problem with nutrigenomics and sometimes microbiome testing as well, is that our ability to test often is not at the level that we need it to be to fully understand the big impacts of these like very complicated systems.
Because the landscape, the topography of the human being's life and behaviors change so much.
Yeah, like that changes a lot. And then also just our understanding of like the microbiome is a great example. We've known about the microbiome and its importance for like decades at this point. But even within those decades of research, we still know very, very little about how to actually influence the microbiome, how to actually get the strains that we want to colonize and actually take up residence within the gut and stay there for a while. We're just now getting to the point where we can kind of start creating these custom probiotic strains that we see, or symbiotics that we see going on. So even though these technologies and these testing protocols have been around for decades now, we're still that in scientific time, that's still very much in the infancy of a field, right? So that's really the thing, is that science progresses, technology progresses, our understanding progresses, but sometimes we know the importance of something and its kind of big impacts that it's going to have on our health and wellness before we actually have the ability to fully test it out.
That's so fascinating to me, because the big question, I've been wanting to ask you this the whole podcast. It was about my own journey with TRT. We spoke about it when we did our Zoom call.
Yeah.
And I think about how many men just go right to TRT. They don't explore any kind of, like Mana, for example, one of the companies I love, or just natural ways to boost T. On the screen right now is something amazing. You had a study that raised testosterone by 50%, which is wild. Now, this is a validated study that you guys are seeing if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube. Go to the show notes, by the way, if you're in your car, because this is one thing I love about science, is that it's this Socratic method, like you said, that's not trying to prove or disprove. You're just essentially doing studies and you're yielding the results. This 50% is a big one, though. How did this come about? Yeah,
so this is a clinical case study that we did in conjunction with the Dave Petrino lab at Mount Sinai. And essentially, it was an 8-week study just looking at, all right, if we give these men a Mimio for just 8 weeks, daily supplementation with Mimio for 8 weeks, how does this impact their health markers? And we were doing this as a test to see what is the length of time that we need to supplement people with Mimio before we can see these clinical effects, and then what are those clinical effects going to be? So we really didn't go in with a hypothesis. We were doing very broad spectrum testing just to see how does this product actually impact human health. And we did not at all expect for testosterone to be increased by 50%. That was just kind of a fun surprise element of the broad spectrum testing that we were doing. And so the results that we got out of that test were really illuminating and really fascinating, because we saw huge changes in a very short period of time. 8 weeks in scientific time and supplementation time.
It's like a blink.
Incredibly fast.
Yeah.
People told us that it was far too short of a study and we wouldn't be able to see anything from just 8 weeks of supplementation. And yet we saw these huge changes. We saw improvements in HbA1c, in insulin levels, in glucose levels, in improving HDL, the good cholesterol, in reducing LDL, the bad cholesterol, in reducing total cholesterol in general. So these big broad spectrum metabolic benefits. And then we saw the 50% increase in testosterone that was happening. And then we also saw a 2.5 year reduction in biological age. So in just that 8 week period of time, we were able to create a lot of these metabolic benefits of fasting, these hormonal benefits of fasting, and these longevity benefits of fasting. And that was when we really knew that we had something special and then was clinically validated.
This is so good because y'all already know that I took a break. I was doing TRT for like 2 years and I've been off for 2 months. I definitely notice like my muscle tone change.
Sure, yeah.
But I've also been, I think it's 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks on the Mimio. So I'm excited. I did a blood test before I started taking it.
Perfect.
So that's actual data. And I'll make sure I do it with the same time, the same lab, everything like that. So even though mine won't be like a scientific ward, it'll be a cool N=1.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me to figure out, okay, well, if this is the only thing that I'm taking, so y'all stay tuned for those results. When this podcast comes out, I'll do my best to share it and just message me if you want to know the results. For someone like myself, I'm 46. We want to have another child. I didn't go into this partnership like knowing that it would impact TRT, but then knowing that I would not have to take as much TRT potentially and how it would impact testosterone. What advice would you give someone like me or just any mid-40s man who's wanting to be able to have children and not necessarily have to take TRT? We know that essentially kills sperm production.
Right.
What advice might you give?
Honestly, I would say that you don't need TRT at this point in your life, really. I think that we're definitely overprescribing TRT, especially to young men.
Yeah.
The big one that pops up in my mind is like clavicular, right? And the whole like look maxing thing where it's like this dude is 25 years old and infertile and already on TRT.
There's no need.
There's no need.
God.
There's no need at all, right? Because it's really not going to be super duper helpful to you until you get more to the advanced ages of 55 plus, right? Where testosterone really naturally starts declining to a point where it's going to start affecting your like day-to-day biology and day-to-day functionality. Before that, like, yes, testosterone peaks, around your mid 30s and then starts declining after that. But the level of decline that's happening is not going to be so biologically impactful that you really need TRT, unless, of course, your doctor actually says, hey, you got really low T levels and we should probably put you on this, right? But folks that are going out to these, these online telehealth clinics and just being like, I'm 25 years old and starting to get that's going to really mess you up in the long term because, as we know with TRT, usually TRT is happening at, number one, a much higher level than natural testosterone production, right? So number one, you're getting kind of, unnaturally high levels, which can, of course, be great for kind of a lot of these rejuvenating like effects, the muscle mass and all the things that people are really taking TRT for.
Yeah.
But they're also having these like fertility side effects, and you're also destroying your natural testosterone production. Your body operates very much on like, oh, great, there's already all this testosterone, so I'm going to like not waste my own energy by making more of it, and I'm just going to shut my production down completely. And in some cases, that can be permanent. So number one, you're kind of getting these unnaturally high levels that can end up in the long term potentially leading to some like very negative side effects, including increased cancer risk, as well as then like totally rewriting your own fundamental biology in terms of your ability to kind of like recover from it. And so you really have to, if you get too deep into it too early on, you can cause some effects that I don't think that most people actually want to have happen from the TRT.
Okay, this is going to be such a fun experiment for me because I'm working with a functional med doc. And I, by the way, like nothing we talk about is medical advice. Y'all have doctors, go see them.
Yeah, please do.
But I am working with an MD And we did the blood test, and I'm doing HCG and Clomid and anastrozole. And so I'm taking all the things that will. I just sent the sperm test yesterday, so we'll see, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, great.
But sperm aside, I really am excited about this because the Shilajit, like we know that Shilajit has great properties for natural testosterone. But there's many ways in which I think people have been accosted. I was going through a really hard time. It was the birth of our second child, and I was like 200. I mean, it was really bad. And I was strength training, and I was doing all these things, sleeping as best as I could. And after 6 months, I was like, I can't do my interviews. Like it was so intense, the drain. Then I came across some research that naturally men's testosterone drops after a child is born. It's like you said earlier, the body knows exactly what it's doing to heal. Well, the body knows exactly what it's doing to make the male attached to the female so that the child rearing can be the focus and not the male chasing anything else. Have you come across this in your research as well?
I actually have not come across that as much. I didn't know that there was the dip that happened.
Like a natural drop, and then some other hormones that I'm no expert on rise as well. I think prolactin was one of them.
Yeah, but it makes total sense to me, right? You know, we always think about hormonal changes happening with pregnancy and like the woman, right? But you know, men understand what's happening with a newborn baby just as much as anything else. And it would make total sense from an evolutionary perspective that our biology would change around that as well, because just like you need, you know, higher levels of oxytocin so you can actually bond with the baby, right? Yeah. There are going to be tons of changes that happen for both the mom and the dad in that newborn baby situation. So I think that that's one of those things, again, where it's like, we have a lot of kind of philosophical wisdom, like traditional wisdom that are around these actual underlying biochemical mechanisms of why is this period of time of like, you know, birth and like this newborn child so important for both parents, and like the gap between us knowing that it's very important and then us knowing why it's very important from a biological perspective and what's actually happening at like the root to biochemical level.
It's such a fun world you operate in. Like I've always said that dorks and geeks run the world. I'm a dork myself. I love to go deep into stuff. Obviously, you have a PhD.
As deep as we can go.
Right? As deep as you can possibly go. I think if you're a dork or a geek, you just love something. It's like the most wealthy people in the world are the people that totally nerd out and like go deep into one thing. They focus, you know, follow one course until success. But I'm curious, like if the body could say something after 2 months of Mimio, what might the body say? Like what would be a message that the body would say thank you for if somebody did 2 months of this Mimio?
Yeah, I would probably say that the body would be the most thankful for just allowing it to get a reset. You know, just allowing it to experience these benefits of fasting that you might not otherwise be able to actually experience, right? To be able to do the cellular detox, right? To be able to optimize your cellular metabolic efficiency, to be able to increase your cellular protection levels, to be able to decrease the amount of cellular stress that you're actually experiencing, which is something else that we've shown in our latest, you know, randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study. So there's a lot of like metabolic resets that can happen. There's a lot of metabolic optimization that can happen. There's a lot of cellular health and functionality changes that are happening. And ultimately, all of that ends up leading to extended longevity. And that's what I think your cells or your body would be most thankful for is thank you for allowing me the tools to take care of myself so that I can take care of you.
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to live another 5 years, 10 years, if we can just reduce that allostatic load? It's a friend of mine, a mentor, Paul Chek. He was like, if your bathtub is already full and you introduce more water, more stress, it's going to overflow. We can't live in that world for too long.
Yeah. And I would say ultimately, you know, even beyond the extension of lifespan, which I think that we have gotten very obsessed with as a culture, especially because of, you know, Brian Johnson and all of these
David Sinclair.
Yeah, David Sinclair.
Yeah.
We always think about lifespan extension as that's what we mean by longevity. But I actually think that that's the wrong way to think about it. I think that lifespan extension doesn't mean anything if you're not also extending what's known as your health span, right? I think that the core of longevity research is really about extending your health span, because it is the time in which you are living at a very good quality of life without experiencing some major health or disease problem, right? And that's really what people want at the end of the day. People don't want to live longer and be like, great, I got to 120, but I stopped having a functional life and good life at the age of 90, right? What we want is to be the guy who's 98 years old, who has always been in perfect health, who's out there running a marathon, finishes it, has a great meal, goes to bed, and then falls asleep, right? And just dies.
Yeah.
Like, we want the time in which we are healthy to coincide exactly with when we die. So this is called the Healthspan lifespan gap, essentially. And I think that the point of Mimio, the point of longevity research, is just making that gap as small as possible.
I was typing on my computer, how did Jack LaLanne die? Check this out, because it's exactly, he passed away at 96 at his home.
Yep.
So he was like literally one of the healthiest. He was like the godfather of fitness. I remember when I was a early personal trainer, I would like study how he talked and just everything that he did. That's essentially what happened to him. And I think from even a telomere perspective, his body just decided like, okay, we've had this amazing existence. He was super active in his 90s, walking. That's what you're talking about with health span. If we can all have a health span, and if I can make it to 96 and be like, on my 96th year of life, going for a walk with my grandchildren, I'm stoked. That's health span.
Absolutely. That's health span. And that, I think, is the real underlying emotional core of longevity research. And the point behind everything that we're doing here is to get you to as old of an age as possible, as healthy as possible, so that you can have this like bright, vibrant life and you don't have to fear getting older. I think that's really the core emotion that we're going after, and really what the point of it all is that we want aging to be able to be a gift, and we want people to be as healthy and as functional as possible for as long as possible, so that they can enjoy their lives as much as possible.
Mic drop right there, Dr. Chris Rhodes. Thank you for coming on the podcast. That was super fun. I love going deep. You've gone as deep as somebody can go in your lane. What's something that you've uncovered that surprised you, shocked you, or that continues to fuel you to continue to go deeper? What is that?
Yeah, I think that there's just so much more to learn. There is so much more about human biology that we don't know. And there's so many ways that we can really unlock the power of that biology. And that's really what drives me forward, is that just like we did what we did with fasting, right? Number one, there's more to uncover there. Yeah, like what we said before, there's 300 of these significant differences that we identified. And of that list, maybe only around 24 actually had, bioactivity that was already known. But that leaves, 275 others, right, that we still don't know enough about, but could be very impactful for human health, or make the formulation better, or better recreate these regenerative processes of fasting. So there's more to learn there. And then other research that we're doing right now is looking at these other really interesting regenerative states of the body. So like what's happening during exercise? Why is exercise so beneficial? What's happening during meditation? Why is that so beneficial? Or sleep or cold exposure? How do these things affect the body? How do they produce their beneficial effects? And how can we recreate them? That's what drives me. And that's what Mimio and the whole biomimetic approach is all about, is understanding our fundamental human biology and giving it back to us so that we can have that power at our fingertips.
I love the fasting in the pill. I don't want the exercise in the pill. I like the sweating. Like, I enjoy sweating in the morning. It's so good.
Yeah,
I don't want the exercise in the pill.
No, that's okay. Like the cool thing that I think that we're going to learn from exercise in a pill is, like, again, these fundamental longevity secrets, these ways that we can improve, cardiovascular health, or we can improve muscle function, or even just improve general performance and recovery from exercise. Like, how do these systems actually operate in the body, and how can we unlock them? We're never going to be able to fully mimic fasting. We're never going to be able to fully mimic exercise because, Mimio can't replace energy restriction, right? It's just not an effect that it's ever going to have. And an exercise mimetic is never going to be able able to replace the physical strain, or even to your deeper point, right? The mental discipline and the spiritual growth that exercise can bring you.
Absolutely.
But we can at least unlock these very interesting regenerative abilities of our own body and be able to activate them when we need them and when we want them.
Wow. What a great conversation. Y'all, it's on the screen right now. Again, joshtrent.com/Mimio Health. The spelling on that is MIMIO Health. Use the code WISDOM at checkout. You get 20% off. And also, if this resonates with you, if you're like me and when you tried to do fasting, your heart felt like it was going to fall out of your rib cage, go this route instead. This is like, we don't have to suffer so much. I one of my quotes earlier was from Gandhi and also the Bhagavad Gita about fasting. And I love that because, in life, we're going to suffer. It's part of the equation. It's like, we're not getting out of here with suffering. But I do believe that we don't have to suffer as much. I really believe that. And so if you've been interested in fasting, but you've struggled with it, give this a shot. This is something that I'm going to be doing. I'll post my results about my testosterone for you all to look at. And really enjoyed this, man.
Yeah, this was great. I loved it.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, I'm wishing you love, wellness, but most importantly, peace and power. You cannot have power unless it comes from peace. We'll see you next week.